Welcome, everyone. My name is Anna Truxas, and I'm the Executive Director at the Portland Chinatown Museum. Thank you for joining us today for our Solidarity Community Artist Talk with Roshani Thakore. Before we get started, I would like to give a land acknowledgement. And forgive me, I have allergies, so I'm a little stuffed up. The Portland Chinatown Museum acknowledges and honors the Indigenous peoples and their descendants of the Lower Columbia and Willamette River region, whose lands the City of Portland and Portland Chinatown Museum currently occupy. These include Willamette, Tumwater, Clackamas, Cathlamet, Molalla, Multnomah, and Matlala Chinook tribes, and the Tualatin Kalapuya, who today are part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, and the many other Chinookan peoples who established communities along the Lower Columbia, whose descendants are today members of the Grand Ronde, Warm Springs, and Siletz Confederated Tribes of Oregon. So also quickly before I do introductions, I wanted to let everyone know that you may place questions as we go into Q&A, and we'll kind of pepper them throughout the presentation as per Roshani's request. And then we'll also have a series of questions that we'd like participants to kind of answer in the chat in a moment. But before we get there, today's presentation is the third program in a new Portland Chinatown Museum Artist Talk series made possible in part by a generous grant from the Neighbors West Northwest and the City of Portland Office of Community and Civic Life. We are so pleased to welcome Roshani Thakore to our Portland Chinatown Museum community. She is an artist and cultural work manager at APANO and has worked on several community art projects you may already be familiar with. I find just profound. Roshani uses art to broaden an understanding of place, uncover histories, elevate voices, and expand a sense of belonging with the hope of reconstructing power. She uses her positionality and power to complicate, leverage, and advocate with people who have been marginalized to transform systems of oppression through political and community education and acts of resistance. During her first year in Portland, she was introduced to APANO through the Creative Placemaking Project Grant opportunity, and as a grantee became the Jade District Artist-in-Residence. During her residency, she created a mapping and walking project called 82nd and Beyond, a living archive. In 2019, she produced the Orchards of 82nd art plan, Living Culture, Past, Present, and Future, to dream up a living, integrated art and community space with ideas and values reflecting the people tied to the building. With the art plan as a foundation, she later launched the East Portland Art and Justice Lab in 2020. And I have to say, I was lucky enough to be at her at a colloquium she co-organized for Portland State University on anti-racism, and it was truly transformative for many of us. So I would like to welcome Roshani.
Thank you, Anna. Wow, thanks for the introduction. And thanks to everyone for taking the time out to join me today. One thing I did hear that the group that is attending might be more of a listening kind of group, but if you have a chance, why don't you go ahead and put your name in the chat, your pronouns, and then I'm just curious about what solidarity means to you. So if you could just do that, that would be awesome, because I'm always just curious how other people interpret that. And then now I can just start my presentation. So can everybody see that okay? Cool. Thanks, Anna. And thanks so much to the Portland Chinatown Museum for the invitation. So yes, my name is Roshani Thakore. I use she, her pronouns, and I want to respectfully acknowledge the Eastern Cherokee and Muskogee territories that I am joining you from in what is also known as Atlanta, Georgia. And so in the next hour, I'll talk about 3 big place-based projects I've been working on through my artist residency at APANO. And I use art to get folks involved in a place, to make something together, and to learn how to share dignified space together. During the past 3 years, this work has been shaping a more solid community in East Portland, and through our community members and local artists, we are building more solidarity in our community. So I'll start from the beginning on how all this came about. So the first project I'll share about is 82nd and Beyond, a living archive, which I started as an artist residency in the neighborhood. And so I love artist residencies. I use this concept as a way to explore and create a project in a particular site and context and with folks in the community. And so this particular project ended up being 5 projects in one. So there was an artist residency in a neighborhood. There was a curated installation. There was a map. There was a public walk. And then there was a film screening. And so to make this project happen, I had amazing collaborators and participants. And I just also always want to acknowledge all the people behind the scenes and also the people that I work with in creating things together. And so this is an image of Portland. It might be an image that some of you are familiar with, maybe you're not familiar with, but it's definitely not the image that probably like the Portland Tourism Board uses in this like idea of what Portland is, but it is a specific cultural landscape that is home to many of the city's population. And so when I was supported by a creative placemaking grant organized by APANO, I started my residency by just looking at a map. And so when I was living in Portland, I was living in the Northeast area, and APANO's down here in East Portland and the Jade District. And even though Portland is relatively small, it seemed like a big geography to like cross, right? And so I concentrated on the area around APANO, Portland's Jade District, a neighborhood prosperity initiative area designated by the city of Portland, centered around Southeast 82nd Avenue and Division Street. And so I learned about the neighborhood and the history and wanted to explore what has shaped and can shape a neighborhood's identity. And then I also learned in my research that these grants had been distributed to artists to create site and context-specific works for 4 years in placemaking efforts. So I thought the place was already there. So I was curious what kind of work was made and where I could find it. So there were over 20 commissioned projects created. So I just started talking to the artists and community members involved in these past projects. And so this is one by Sabina Hawk. I'm sure you know her work. She's brilliant. Local artist, and she collaborated with youth from Madison High School and created a piece called Our City, Our Voice, and it addresses the East-West disparities in Portland. This is another project called Wish You Were Here by Christine Toth, and it was a postcard exchange project with small business portraits in further East Portland. And then this is Patricia Vasquez Gomez, who interviewed locals and created prints to highlight the linguistic diversity of the area. It's called Shared Wisdom. And so to keep these projects within the social landscape of the community, I reinstalled a number of these works within neighborhood sites. And in an effort to create connectivity with these works and stories, I collaborated with the local map maker, Sachi Arakawa, to create a walking path highlighting these sites along with neighborhood gems called 82nd and Beyond, a living archive. So this is it's a printed map, and this is an image of the map. And then this is a PDF of the map, that's side 1, that has the walking path and then information about the sites and the artists that worked on the projects with the local businesses. And then on the other side, just an introduction and also getting the favorite places and routes that people who live and work in the area to, whether it's through biking or walking or other ways of wayfinding in the neighborhood. And so for broader accessibility, the map was printed into a physical form, translated into Vietnamese and Chinese, and debuted at the Jade International Night Market. The maps were distributed at all of the sites that were included. And so to activate all of the neighborhood sites, Sachi and I co-led a public walk with conversations and local histories told by the participating artists and community members. And so everybody got a map, and we went, and actually that building behind me, that is APANO in construction. So it was before APANO, the new building, Orchards of 82nd, was built. And so we were exploring the neighborhood through this map and through these artworks that were installed. And so this is Mojo Crepes, which is off of Southeast Division. Really cool owner, John. And on the right, you can see another mural by Alex Chu. And a lot of these sites had TVs in them already, and a lot of the artworks were films. And so I just asked if we could use the TVs to install the films and show the films. And so this is a film that talks about the Jade neighborhood and its history by a local artist that's playing in Mojo Crepes. And then this is Christine Toth's postcard project that I had mentioned earlier. And so I took these postcards and framed them, and then went to the businesses and kind of like created a museum label and installed the postcards in there. And so that's Henry at Brixton Beauty Supply. And this is John at Portland Music with his postcards. And I also created little lawn signs that the businesses would put in front of their doors so that people, when they're walking, would know that this was a site. And then when we were going on our walk, there's a pedestrian bridge on Division and 87th, I believe. And Rodolfo Serna was actively working on a mural there. And so we were able to like meet with him and talk to him about his work. And then we ended, we ended at the beloved Canton Grill, which unfortunately is no longer around. And it was the oldest Chinese American restaurant after Hung Far Lo. And Cindy Lewis was a third generation owner, and there's just all of this history in the site, and it was a staple and anchor for the neighborhood. And so she would give a tour to us and just like anybody who's interested in hearing the history. And so in all my research as an artist in residence and with the conversations that came up on the walk, I wanted to expand the conversation more on shaping neighborhood identity. So that's like kind of like getting the understanding of the history and involving community members, business owners, and artists. And then I was curious about like the present and shaping of the neighborhood identity. And so I learned about a short film made about East Portland called The Numbers. And so let's see. The Numbers is a film by Sika Stanton and Donovan Smith. And it had never been shown in East Portland. And so I collaborated with them to host a film screening at the oldest structure in their neighborhood, Canton Grill. And so all of this was 2018. The residency was in all of since 2018, so before our global pandemic. And so after the screening, we had the screening at the restaurant. We hosted a community discussion along with live performances by Donovan Smith and Universe, and basically talking about the theme of neighborhood identity. And local artists, community members, city agency representatives, anti-gentrification allies, urban planners, and local advocacy organizations attended for food, art, and to participate in an honest discussion on neighborhood identity. So that was the culmination of the artist residency that lasted for a year in 2018. And then this project allowed me as a socially engaged artist to formalize my interest in forming relationships and my exploration of the history and culture of a neighborhood and amplify its social fabric by creating a structure to operate in it. And then after the residency, APANO was planning on relocating to a new building. So that building that was under construction and that other image. And so to continue strengthening the relationships, Candace Kita, who is my partner in crime at APANO, she's amazing. She's a cultural strategy director, an artist, an astrologer, and just a wonderful human. she commissioned me to create a conceptual framework for their new building, Orchards of 82nd, which is a mixed-use building in East Portland housing 3 entities under one roof. So we have APANO, the culturally specific grassroots social justice organization. And then we have Residency, which is a community development corporation investing in affordable housing in outer Southeast Portland. And then we have new tenants living in 48 units of affordable housing. And so with what I learned from 82nd and beyond, and because of the conversations I was having with community members and Candace, I knew if I was going to create a framework, I wanted to center the erased culture from the past and engage with the people tied to the community in the present. I wanted this project to reframe the possibility of exciting futures of East Portland through a grassroots methodology. And so this is the building. And so up here is the housing. And then the APANO offices and community space is on the ground floor towards 82nd. And then on Division, there's more community space through Residency. And so I saw this as an opportunity to include the unique social capital of the site. If you don't know, the Jade District is the most diverse area in Portland. And when you have 48 units of affordable housing on a site, it's a pretty dense block compared to other blocks. And there's like, you know, I think a minimum of 6 languages spoken at Orchards of 82nd. So it's a very unique site in considering the geography of Portland. And so to get input from community members, I hosted a number of forums and workshops to interview and learn more about what art and stories the buildings should have. And so that's me and Candace. These are the flyers, trying to make fun flyers for people to get engaged. And being very specific about questions of just like, what kind of things would you like to see at Orchards of 82nd? To like, how do you feel about the neighborhood? And like asking where folks are from, and like, what do you do in your free time? And like, what kind of work you do? And just like getting a sense of like, who is in the building. And so those are the flyers. And then we just hosted workshops. And these are local artists, Daniel and Jake, with the residents of 082, talking about art and asking and just creating drawings and looking at art. And I think one thing that was very impactful was just like meeting everybody where they're at, or just trying to. So we have like a bunch of youth that attended, and we also had folks that are from different parts of the world. And so to make sure that the books and the materials that we had reflected the cultures that were in the room too. And so Ismail was very excited because he's like, oh, I know this script and it's about art from the arts of Islamic culture. And so immediately he just like really got excited to talk about the art, the script, and the arts and culture that he grew up with. And so it was really easy to disarm and just like get people talking about what they think about art and culture. And so with all of the input, I created a zine as an alternative form to standard public art planning documents. And I wanted to prioritize the complex but unique living culture that is usually imagined by outside administrators and typically tokenized. Voices and ideas of community members are intentionally woven into this project. Ideas include exhibitions of neighborhood history, a community-generated archive, an artist-in-residence fellowship, community dinners, murals, cooking, and more. So this is the 082, the Orchards of 82nd Art Plan, Living Culture, Past, Present, and Future. And this is the centerfold where they have, I put the community desires for 082, which ranges from like wanting to see performances of African songs and architecture from Africa from Ismail, to making sure that there's a lot of stuff that kids can do, programming for kids to do. And so for the APANO community space, you might recognize this person. We wanted to commission local artists to create new works in the space. And so we invited Alex Chu, the beloved Alex Chu, to create 2 murals preserving cultural legacy through community members' stories and photos. And so that's one of the walls that he did at the community space. And of course, our beloved Lynn Yarn, which you might recognize as well. And she created an installation honoring the Japanese farmers that thrived in the area prior to World War II and the Executive Order 9066 using archival photos. And so this is called East Portland Farmers. And so we created this art plan and we had to like share it with community. So we had a party, and at the launch, we debuted the murals that Alex and Lynn created, served a soup inspired by the Shiogi family and one of the Japanese families, farming families, and then were graced by some of the Japanese elders who were featured in Lynn's installation. And so, like I said, this project allowed me to deepen the relationships I had already formed in the neighborhood and create another platform that expresses the voices and needs of the community and collectively shape it in real time. And so the third project I'll talk about, and I feel like I'm throwing a lot of like content. So yeah, if there are questions, just let me know. I'm having, okay, I'm just trying to catch the chat too, okay.
Anna had a question about how did you choose your locations for the mapping project, or how did you find those connections to make?
Oh, great, yes, that's a good question. So it was through the research that I did where the past artists who had already did a project with. And so the postcard project that Christine Toth did she did that maybe in like 2016. And so I just met with her and then I like looked at the postcards and then I just like looked at, went to those businesses that she featured and then just started talking to them. And so it's like kind of reinstalling work that has been made since all of the other work was temporary. So kind of making it a little bit more permanent. So yeah, it was through the past projects, through the Creative Placemaking Grant opportunities. Cool. So I can talk to you about the East Portland Art and Justice Lab, which is active right now. And so it's a third project, and I wanted to make sure that the project would be something that would allow for evolution over time. And so having the project be a lab felt important because there just needed to be a space for experimentation with different community members coming through. And it seemed important to have new shared learning together and through each other too. And so the collaborators, definitely APANO staff, including Candace and Elisa, APANO artists, and then Residency and the tenants of OD2, including Elise, Grace, Aiden, and Keitha, Felicia, and more collaborators to come. There could be some in this room. And so, excuse me, taking the input from community members for the art plan, the lab acts as a platform that amplifies the knowledge and resources available in areas of resilience, linguistic, ethnic, and cultural diversity, and resourcefulness directly by the people themselves. The lab focuses on creating and keeping cultural memories and the social fabric of the neighborhood intact through experimental art making activities, discussions, and more. And so that night when we had the party for the art plan launch, we wanted to have a design contest for the lab's logo. And so people put in their submissions, everyone voted, and then the winner was Alex Chu's daughter, Mazzy. And so that's her logo at the bottom. That's Mazzy and their mom Amisa working on different logos, and then we got Alex to paint Mazzy's logo next to his painting in the community space. So we're having father-daughter murals in the space. And in addition to the logo, we couldn't have a lab without lab coats. So, and that comes because my mother retired from 30 years as a lab technician here in Georgia. And so she gave me her extra lab coats. And so she and I designed patches and for the pockets with the words dream and scheme. And then I wanted to add important activists from our community to the coats and have versions with Grace Lee Boggs, Fulan Devi, the Bandit Queen, Yuri Kochiyama, and more. And these coats act as a tool to consider whoever puts them on, asking, what are you able to do when you know your ancestors have your back? And so the lab's first 3 priorities, they launched in January 2020. So we all know what happened later that year. But we were aiming to think about the Artist-in-Residence program, a print studio, and a curatorial committee called the 082 Art Crew. And so the 082 Art Crew is a group of artists and community members interested in how art can be used in community with the tenets of 082 as the primary audience. It is a mixed race space that allows for practicing centering BIPOC experiences in solidarity. The goal is to create a collaborative and intentional space that considers the question of how art and culture can be integrated into daily life. The primary site the crew uses is the 082 lobby for exhibitions. Other sites include APANO restrooms, the playground, plazas, hallways in the building, social media, and the internet. And so research, engagement, and production are the main areas of practice for the crew. And so this is an exhibition that the crew worked on called I Am Home. And members of the art crew wanted to get to know the incredible residents at 082 and hosted workshops and conversations talking about what makes a house into a home and a place into a community. And so we all had meaningful conversations when making portraits of 082 residents and learned that this is not a perfect place to live. And with that, community, safety, and respect for ourselves, our neighbors, and everyone is important. And so one thing that came from this process of creating the exhibition is just knowing that inclusive decision-making about 082 is also really important. And so some of the other exhibitions we produced, on the left, we have Blue, a local artist who's painting a mural for the exhibition We Are Still Here, which features, works from elevating the impact of the prison industrial complex and the need for abolition, featuring works from incarcerated and formerly incarcerated artists. At the bottom right, we have the exhibition, this is Calipuyan Land, which was on loan from the Five Oaks Museum. And the exhibition, that was the inaugural exhibition sharing the work and history from Indigenous artists in the area. And then the current exhibition we have now is called Let's Talk About 82nd. And it's an anti-gentrification exhibition highlighting the migration stories of the people in Southeast Portland with generations of displacement. And so we have a community map that was designed by Jose, who's part of the art crew. And then at the bottom, these are the posters that talk about the different histories of people that lived and are now living in Southeast Portland. And so also with the lab, we have the artist residency program. And so we've been able to have multiple artist residencies since 2020. And the first one was the pilot with 3 local artists, Sabina Hawk, Carrie Maija, and me. And we partnered up with 3 tenants of 082, Felicia Graham, Nikki Acevedo, and Myra Aldana. And so the 6 of us, when we partnered up, we as a team created a socially relevant public art project. And so we had a year to work together, and this is at the beginning of COVID. And so the timing was actually it was needed to have research and exploration of a topic. And so on the left, we have the Forgotten Birds installation, talking about family separations at the US and Mexico border. That was by Sabina Hawk and Nikki Severo. And on the right bottom, you can see an installation of the Forgotten Birds installation in the exhibition. And up top, there are two projects there. On the left is called The Computer is Okay, and it's a children's book highlighting learning during the pandemic through the lens of a local elementary school teacher. And then on the right, and that was by Carrie Maija and Myra Aldana. And then on the right, that was a project by me and Felicia Graham called Black Birth Matters. And it's a publication and a project sharing the history and the value of doulas in the Black community, and primarily because Felicia Graham is a doula. And so part of the project was like me getting to learn from her about her practice and then creating a project together to amplify that. So that was a pilot artist residency, and currently we have Grace Kwan as the artist in residence, and she is working with tenants at 082 on a community newspaper. And so she has been hosting watch parties for APANO's Resilience Series program. And so this is the Row CDC community space where they're watching the online programming and taking watch party notes together. And she's collecting that information, and through this participation, she also got people that were interested in co-creating the newspaper together. So this is like, so it's happening right now. So we just got these prints this past Friday. They're hot off the press of the first newspaper. It's called Orchards Community News. And so there's going to be different features and drawings you can see. And so that will be the East Portland newspaper based in Orchards of 82nd. And then we have a print studio. That's the third priority from the East Portland's Art and Justice Lab. And so we wanted to have a project where people can make things and publish their own ideas, right? Just like thinking about the newspaper. And so we were able to get a risograph machine and began a BIPOC printmakers residency. And so on the left, we had Jade District, who was the first printmaker in residence. And so each artist has 3 months to use the studio to create their own work. And they also create a print that focuses on APANO's organizing and advocacy work. And then they also host community workshops. And so on the right, you can see the different prints that are coming out from one of the workshops that Jade hosted. And so right now we are upgrading our risograph machine so that we can have the newspaper continue as a resource and a place of participation for local community members to like share their ideas and make things. And then we will also probably continue the printmaking residency until next year as well. Oops. And so these are some of the prints that we also created. This was, you know, as the uptick of like hate crimes against Asians have been happening during the pandemic. A few of the local artists, we wanted to get together and create posters and prints for it. And so these are just a few of them that we were able to create. And then we were able to put them on the side of Southeast Division off of APANO. And so These are also additional signs too that were made by other local artists for the rally for Stop Asian Hate, and I think it was spring of last year. And so that was another way that we wanted to activate the print studio as well. And so those are the big projects that I've been working on. I know I'm like a little under time, but I feel like I did a lot of talking. And so I'm happy to take questions or anything, but I think when the work that we've been doing in East Portland is ultimately, we're just learning to make dignified culture together and in relationship with each other. And because it's been a population that has been displaced because of various different reasons, we wanted to create a framework and lay down the foundation of like, how do we share space together? How do we build a solid community? And then how can we, for all of our struggles, build solidarity? So, thank you.
Thank you. That has been a really invaluable presentation for us, because at the museum, we're thinking about doing all the very same things that you've already done. So it's been such a great learning experience and so helpful to us. Anna, did you want to start off with some questions?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Kapiolani said, though. The whole time I was resisting, just flooding the chat with, this is all so appropriate and relevant to our neighborhood as well. And your strategies are really profound, because we've been grappling with the bridge between the cultural event and the actual, kind of concrete resolution of some of these very serious issues that we face. Most recently, looking at yet another spike in hate crimes, and wanting to understand how we bridge that gap between, the activities that we do and real solutions. So this was really informative and inspiring, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
But we do have a series of questions I wanted to make sure that we got to ask you. And just one more question before I dive into those. I was interested too in how you choose, going forward. I loved how you chose the sites for your, project specifically, but I'm also interested in going forward. Do you have a checklist or an idea of how you'll choose future locations?
For just doing any kind of project generally?
Yeah, for your placemaking and projects.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's been through relationship building. Should I stop sharing, by the way?
It's a really lovely image.
Okay.
You're welcome to do whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay.
Our first question is, what is currently inspiring or informing your work right now as an artist? Which we saw a lot of already, but distill it.
Yeah. So and just to go back to the other question too, is as I hope that you can understand, is that so much of this work is it's slow work, right? And it's also organic and dependent on relationship building. And so we are starting to talk about the evolution of these projects. And it really does come from community and from the relationships that we've built. And honestly, in thinking about the inspiration, it's just been so inspiring meeting all of the local artists through APANO and seeing what folks are working on. I feel like right now, since I've relocated to Atlanta, I've just been kind of taking in what's happening here. And there's just a lot of different kind of organizing and art happening here too. So it's just this, I think I feel really grateful to have figured out a kind of framework and approach to kind of explore whatever site and whatever context and try to find the project within it, you know? So
That's great. Capulani, do you want to take the next question?
Yes. So you're very highly engaged in lots of interactive activities with the different communities that you work with. Do you have a favorite story, impression, or takeaway from the work that you've done or are doing right now?
that's a hard one because it's been so many stories. I know I think I think like a general kind of thing is just that, you know, I came in as an outsider, right? And I was trying to be as respectful and like curious as possible when I was working on the Jade District Residency, the 82nd and Beyond Living Archive. And this group of people already were like being asked a lot of questions from all these different kinds of entities. And so there was like PBOT and there's like all of these city agencies and I didn't, and so there was, you know, like trust that had to be built. And a lot of folks weren't forthcoming at first. And so that, like I kept on like thinking and trying to figure out the engagement stuff, but then realizing that, you know, the group of people in this area, they've encountered a lot of displacement. They've experienced a lot of displacement. They've encountered a lot of extraction, and there hasn't necessarily been a balance of like centering them in spaces. And so I think the thing that kind of like shocked me was when I was framing the postcard projects and installing them in the different businesses. And so I went to the Portland Music Place, and John, just this like regular music guy, was really like just loved to talk about music all the time. I like just went in there and I just showed him the postcard, and then he just started crying. And I was just like, I was just like so moved, and I was just like, I didn't know that, you know, this would be like, you would be interested in that, it would be important to you. But he's like, this is my store, this is my baby, and see it like honored in this way. And so I've always just kept that of how I don't know, because of so much distrust and extraction, of how to really center people who've experienced a lot of that. And I don't know, I just kind of like hold that too. So
That's a really beautiful detail that we wouldn't know otherwise either, because you know the picture of him, he's clearly honored, but a wonderful detail. I was thinking you may have said Mazzy's logo too. That was so fabulous.
that was ridiculous. Yes, no,
that was so wonderful.
So
Yeah.
fun.
Roberta has a question for you. Maybe let's see.
I wonder if can we chat? Can you? There we go.
Roberta, would you like to ask your question?
I apologize. I didn't have a question per se. I was trying to navigate my site here, and I'm unable to use my chat because it was disabled, and I don't know how to get that back. But I wanted to just say how excellent, you know, your work has been, and appreciate all your efforts in bringing community together. So thank you.
Thanks, Roberta.
Wonderful. Yeah, I feel like Roberta, you know, we've been looking at Chinatown, Japantown, and I think this probably resonates a lot with Roberta because so much of what you've done through APANO would be so helpful in our neighborhood as well. So, yeah. Let's see here. I have the next question, right, Kapiolani? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. And actually this is, you know, kind of in line with what, you know, your presentation has inspired for me. What strategies do you suggest for those new to collaborative art and placemaking? How, and then there are a couple of follow-ups, but I'll repeat any question you want me to. How could someone help start similar kinds of art and or placemaking projects in the communities that they live in?
Yeah, really good questions. I feel like there's a few different things that I would, I guess, consider. So I think that the first thing is that meeting people where they're at. And so you're not, like, I had to take some time to learn that folks in this area have been constantly displaced and extracted and things like that. So not kind of like forcing things and not like allowing things to flow organically and giving it the space and time that it needs, which is, you know, counter to, you know, funding deadlines and institutional deadlines and things like that. But I think especially doing this kind of work in the pandemic, it's made us prioritize that kind of approach and push back on funders to allow us to get to the work that is really there. And then, like, instead of just like making a thing to make a thing to meet a deadline. And then I think one thing is that there's already so much stuff happening. And it may not necessarily be like a placekeeping project or something, but there's like stuff happening in every neighborhood, and like to come with curiosity and to just like show up to things. I think the residency, I learned that I learned that like showing up was such a big deal because they realized that like I'm not going away. They're not just like I would come to like have another lunch at Thai Fresh and then like go to Canton Grill and do karaoke and like just support the stuff that's already happening there. I think because there's already a culture there that and I think an interesting thing an artist can do is kind of just amplify or uncover it, or yeah, just to present it in a different way.
That's wonderful. I had a dog barking in the background, so I muted for a moment. But you're right. And it was making me think just about our neighborhood and everything that is there, and the amplification of it would be a really wonderful tool for us to use. So many inspirations.
So as someone who works with many different communities, what is your approach? And I think you've already touched on this before, but what is your approach to building relationships and connections that can be sustained after a project is done? This question comes, I think, out of a lot of observations by artists and organizations. Like, you build this great momentum with an event or a project or an exhibition, and then you're not quite sure where to keep going with it or how to keep it going. So what is your insight into that? How do you approach building for the long term?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there is, I mean, before, I was in a very unique position where, you know, as a freelance artist, to be continued like continued like hired by Candace and APANO, and then like a formal staff position was opened up, and being able to like apply for that and get that. And that just really showed that Candace and APANO really prioritizes relationships and isn't reinventing the wheel every time, and like, you know, trying to do something new and but like really anchored in relationship building. And so having that was as an anchor was just really helpful as an outsider artist to come into, and having the connections there already. And the way that I work is through creating structures so that these things can be sustained, and that these projects aren't necessarily like made like just by me. Obviously it's made with other people, and so in the making, having space for others to feel ownership around it, and also creating entry points for other folks to keep it going. And so like, for example, the art crew has like a couple of people that have started from the beginning, but then they're like phasing out, but then other people are coming in and other people are like interested in it. And so allowing space for in a structure to allow other people to take parts of like ownership of it, I feel like that's the thing that I'm trying to figure out and like make sure that happens. That seems to be working, because yeah, I've just been thinking so much about sustainability of these things, and part of it also is in the approach of giving a lot of agency to collaborators and participants so that they can feel ownership in the project, and it's not just like their opportunity to work with an artist. Like, no, it's like you're an artist too, and you get to like co-create something together and like give a part of yourself to this, and like learn new skills, but then also like have like think about like what other things they can plug into after the project is over.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's well, and it's apparent that your projects, you know, proliferate too. It seems like you've achieved that, or you know, the phase right after the project, there's still kind of, you know, activity and motion for it. So that's great. In the chat, everyone, Capulani is including links for some of the projects and places we've been discussing. And before I ask our final question, I also just want to make sure folks know that you can put questions in the Q&A if you want to ask anything, or also, you know, raise a hand or put it in the chat, and we'll make sure that Roshani sees that. But really what we're most excited to hear about is, what are your future projects after seeing all the incredible work you've done already? We're so excited to hear about what's, you know, on the horizon for you.
Yeah. Well, one thing is that I'm super excited about is like, so that newspaper, that's just like the beginning, and that is going to be continued, and we'll probably have, yeah, I think I mentioned this, we'll probably have someone who's going to be like just the newspaper person to publish regularly. So that seems pretty exciting. And then the other thing is, along with the exhibition we have on view now, let's talk about 82nd. We created a welcome kit for new neighbors, and it's called How to Love 82nd So Everyone Can Thrive. And so it's taking the reality that gentrification is happening and creating space for current neighbors to talk about their feelings about it and what they expect from a new neighbor, and what they want to see in terms of development in their neighborhood. And so we interviewed tenants at 082, and we have this welcome kit that's just printed as well. And so that will be distributed and for the closing of the exhibition as well.
That's great. I can't wait to see some of this. I plan to show up and enjoy some of this in person.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, and I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss any questions from anyone else. It was a wonderful presentation, and we are just generally a bit quieter in our presentations, but I can tell from the chat that people really appreciated it.
Yeah. I mean, I have my info in the chat, so if people ever want to like learn more or come see a show or do anything in East Portland, please feel free to reach out.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you so much to Roshani and to all of the folks who joined us today on this summer day as we celebrate and learn more about our local Asian American artists working in the intersections of community, history, and culture. And I know, Roshani, you said outsider, but I think you're definitely a Portlander with all this good work. And we hope you will join us for our final artist talk in August, which will be announced in the coming weeks. If you'd like to rewatch this program, which I think many of our community will want to do both here and who couldn't make it, it will be available on our website at www.portlandchinatownmuseum.org by Monday, July 25th. And until then, we just want to wish you all a wonderful weekend. And thanks again to Roshani for a truly inspiring presentation.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.